FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's July 25th, 2018. Hey, as always, send us your emails. Like I say, I review them when I'm banging down a latte at an undisclosed coffee shop close to my house. And today I got out early, so I got out of the place early, and we're starting the show early. Anyways, just send your emails to kl@kerrylutz.com. Trump economy, is Trump responsible for it, or is it really the Obama economy? Obama laying the groundwork for Trump prosperity. Well, with us now is Andrew Zatlin from Moneyball Economics. Welcome back, Andrew.
Thanks, Kerry. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a moment and say it's not financial survival, it's financial thrival.
I thought about changing the name on a number of occasions, but you've been with us this long, so you'll probably stay with us. So
there we go.
So, what about this economy? We're looking at GDP coming quarter or current quarter, a 4.5% increase. We haven't seen that. We never even saw 3% growth during Trump's predecessor's regime. What's the cause of all this, Andrew? Is it just Trump is a stable genius?
You said it. Well, not the stable genius part, but this is a Trump economy. It really is. And I think it's time to stop saying, well, the seeds were laid under Obama. In fact, quite the opposite. If you go back 2 years, the economy was crashing and burning. In fact, when we got to September, 2 months away from where we are now, 2 years ago, I was sitting in on all these earnings calls, and every CEO was basically throwing in the towel, saying, you know what, this economy is so bad, things are so horrible that if things don't change by January, and we're talking, they were referencing January 2017, by January, we're going to be doing layoffs. This economy is crap. Everything that could go bad is going bad. Then Trump gets elected, and he starts doing what Trump does, which is a lot of getting on the soapbox and motivating the crowds. Remember, he's a master salesman. But what does he really start doing? What he starts doing is he says, I am going to try and open up the economy. He is a business-first president. So this is not a president who's focused on social issues. This is not a president who wants to shackle the economy with more agenda items that are of importance to his base. Quite the opposite. This is a president who says from day one, while he was on the campaign trail, I want to free up the economy and I want to reinvigorate the U.S. manufacturing base and the U.S. economy. And I want to do that in a variety of ways. And one of them is going to be, I want to onshore manufacturing and I want to do trade deals that make sense. In fact, I want to do deals in general that make sense. And we've got, whether it's a 70-year-old NATO deal or a 20-something-year-old NAFTA deal, we've got deals. And in my experience, you always go back and you revisit the deals to make sure that they're working. And what we have is in less than a year, the economy goes from CEOs announcing that they're thinking about layoffs to suddenly saying, hey, I like this chat. I like this. I like the cut of this man's jib. I like what he's saying. Let's see how it plays out. Then we see not just the chatter, not just that confidence and that salesmanship. We see actual hard efforts hitting the table. So in essence, what I'm saying is you have someone coming in and at first rallying the troops saying we're going to change the way Washington approaches business. It's business first, and we're going to do the things that are going to free you up. And he starts not just talking, he starts actually taking action. His first step doesn't work. Remember, the health care trying to remove Obamacare doesn't succeed. So he shifts gears, and within a year, we've got things like a tax cut. We have other kinds of regulations being pulled back. We have basically a White House that is trying to promote business and trying to remove the things that are not business first. And we can raise our hand and say, is that reasonable? Is that balanced? Is that what we want? Doesn't matter. We're having an economics discussion right now, and we're talking about how Trump has changed the playing field. And he's moving things in a direction that say the U.S. economy was not heading down the right path. Now I'm going to take action that say we're going to reinvigorate this economy. And he is taking concrete action, and he's suggesting even more actions. And I got to tell you, it's this is why we have a GDP that's so strong. And I think the only thing I'm seeing right now out there in sort of the wall of worry that people always want to build is kind of a what have you done for me lately type of view. Yeah. People are saying, sure, the economy is strong. This time last year, people were saying, yeah, but it was Obama. Now they can't say that so much. The economy is strong quarter after quarter after quarter. Trump is still taking actions to bring home the bacon. And now they can't dismiss Trump. They can't dismiss this economy and say it was something that someone else had laid the groundwork for. This is 100% a Trump economy. But so now that wall of worry is shifting. Yeah. But now he's stepping on his own toes with this tariff stuff. Or yeah. But I don't care what you did for me in the second quarter. Talk to me about fourth quarter. Talk to me about next year, 2020 even. It's the nonsense that you hear. The reality is this economy is so strong. I'm coming out with a payroll number that's going to be about 250K. That's a big number. In context, that will be the biggest number we've seen in about 4 or 5 months. And again, when people are talking about payrolls, they're talking about a one benchmark snapshot, a finger of the pulse of the economy. Are companies feeling good, and are they hiring people to support the business that's coming in? And a number like I just mentioned, 250K, is a super strong number. And I think people are going to be blown away by it.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting, and you might just be correct. You're always one to be harping on new claims, new unemployment claims.
Yeah.
And, you were kind of indicating you expected them to go higher about a year ago. And in fact, they've done the opposite.
I have been wrong. I have been wrong about the degree.
Let me emphasize this, okay? You are wrong. All right, got it.
I am wrong. So where I was coming from last year was, okay, we have this. I was contextualizing, and I was looking at my data. Again, I'm data driven. I'm not one of these persons who comes out with an agenda and then cherry picks the data that fits. What I was seeing last year was actually go back to what I said. 2 years ago, economy's crashing and burning. Then you get that seesaw effect where then the economy reemerges thanks to Trump and things go booming. Well, once things reflated, it looked like they were stabilizing, which means, they weren't going to continue to go zooming higher. And my data was sort of showing that. My data was saying, look, companies are hiring and they're not firing as much, but it's not this ongoing, rocket ship to the moon. That's what the data was saying. And so I was buying into it and saying, you know what, we've kind of bottomed on jobless claims and, still fantastic scenario, but it's just not going to get any better. I mean, where do you go from here? And it turns out you go even better. Jobless claims are almost at a 50-year low. And let's really talk about that. That's a nominal number. Hey, 50 years ago, they were around 200,000. Now they're at 200 and recently they fell to 207. But 50 years ago, we had fewer people in the workforce. So that 200 grand of jobless claims relative to the workforce was more meaningful. It was a higher number of people were out of work. So to say we have a 50-year low of jobless claims really misses the huge impact of what that means. It's not just that we've got this nominal level that's low. It's relative to the job base, relative to the number of people out there who are working. That's incredibly low. That's almost 100 years low. That's how strong this economy has gotten. And the question is, where do we go from here? And I think we continue to go up. I think there are going to be some headwinds. I mean, this tariff thing has an effect, but it has a positive and a negative effect depending on which sector of the economy you're sitting in. Eventually, over the course of a couple of months, we're going to emerge from this stronger because our trading partners are blinking. They are.
What choice do they have? It's a case of the debtor owning the bank, isn't it? Really?
Somewhat. I mean, look at China. So China's very much focused on the people, right? The people have a way of rising up and making their gripes known. In fact, they kill people. The peasants have had lots of uprisings in China.
It's been known to happen.
Known to happen. And so the leadership is always very sensitive. There's a basic thing in China. Their number one source of protein is hog, right? Ours is, beef, chicken. Theirs is hog. And we're the number one source or one of the number one sources of hog meat and pork. And guess what? They just slapped a 60-70% tariff on U.S. pork. And yes, that does hurt the U.S. farmer, which is why, Trump is coming out and saying, here, let me help you through this tough time. But let's take a look at the reality. If you slap a tariff on pork imports, all you're doing in China is look at it from the Chinese consumer's perspective. First of all, the absolute price of pork goes up if you put a tariff on it. Secondly, their currency has been crashing and burning the past couple of months. China's deliberately doing what they do best, which is to devalue their currency so that they can export more. But when you devalue your currency, it means that the price of all your goods that you're importing go up. So the Chinese consumer is suddenly in a situation where the price of their food is about to surge. So we may have a pain point where we have trouble selling some of our soy or some of our pork. But China has basically hit 1 billion people with higher food prices because of what's going on. So yes, we've got one sector not doing well versus China, 100% of their consumers suddenly not happy. So China has a couple of months where they can play this game. But once they come into the wintertime, they can't play this game anymore because that's when the people tend to go home. Right. That's when agitation tends to happen. So the only thing we have, if you're looking at Trump, he's got all the right cards. Let's face it, we have the market. Like you said, even though we're the debtor nation and debtor economy, but it's $500 billion a year. China, what are you going to do? If you peel back, China's struggling right now. Let me just be perfectly frank. If you look at the data, when Trump started this tariff war, imports from China into the U.S. crashed. They went from in February 15% year over year to 3%. We stopped importing from China, and that was because largely steel. We have started to onshore steel production. We have effectively stripped away billions of dollars from Chinese businesses simply by imposing a slight tariff. And that's before the larger tariffs that Trump is invoking. We got their attention. We basically said, China, your exports to the world are going to contract. And when you start looking at their exports out of Hong Kong, which is their largest port, have contracted on a year-over-year basis. They are selling less to the world. And we are a big part of that. Why? Because we basically have held up our hand and said no more. Now, this is huge because, again, China's got this Ponzi scheme going. They need cash flow to keep their companies, afloat. When you not only stop their growth, but reverse it, you create untold pain. And so right now, China is trying to stay afloat. This is why they're going to blink. China is now looking at yet again, they saw this a couple of years ago, where debt, you saw bankruptcy waves started to perk up. They're starting to see that again. So they've started to yet again loosen monetary policy, do all these horrible things to keep zombie companies afloat. And this is basically Trump popping their balloon and saying, if you don't play ball with us, it's just going to get worse for you. For us, okay, so soybeans don't get sold as much. And Kerry, this is the thing that I look at. I find this whole thing by China to be foolish. So they don't buy U.S. pork. Well, so that
Someone
just means they're going to buy more Brazilian or Australian hog. And then Brazilian and Australians are going to say, oh, this is fantastic. You got nowhere else to go. I'm just going to raise my prices. This is, and then the U.S. is going to sell their pork to Brazil and Canada to then sell on to China. So ultimately, in the near term, there are problems because the direct trade is going to buckle. China's going to cancel contracts for U.S. pork. And they're going to increase contracts for Canada, and then the U.S. farmer is just going to ship it to Canada. Yeah. So, in the end, the U.S. is not going to have problems here. It's all China going to have problems, and they've already started to experience those problems. Our balance of trade has actually improved ever since Trump started this tariff war. So, I mean, Trump is right. Let's put it that way. Now, how it affects the economy in the short term, you've got some companies that are doing fantastic. Nucor. Now, Nucor is a U.S. steel company, one of our top steel companies. They just reported just last week, second best quarter in their history. Their factories are at 95% capacity. So for the steel makers, this has been a blessing. This is huge. For some companies, though, they're not having to pay more for steel, and they're not happy, and they're going to try to pass this off. And inflation begets inflation, kind of a thing. But overall, what's happening is an onshoring of manufacturing into the U.S., and that's jobs positive. That's what we're seeing in the payrolls. It's ultimately positive overall because you're going to see with China exactly what you saw with Japan when Reagan did the same thing, when Reagan basically said, enough. You're going to see Chinese manufacturing shift over here. It's interesting because a lot of the how do you move the dial? We've got $120 billion of smartphones being imported. It's very easy to make smartphones in the U.S. A lot of this is not human capital, but robots. It's machinery. You could literally set up an entire factory to make the smartphone, to make the Apple iPhone in less than 6 months. You could go from 0 to 60 almost overnight.
It will get more expensive, though, to buy an iPhone in the U.S. as a result of it. That you can't deny that.
Okay, but let me talk about that because that's where I was going. That's a good point. Is it going to cost more? Well, yeah, and here's why. It will cost an extra $5 or $10 per iPhone to use a U.S.-based worker. Now, $5 to $10 on a $1,000 device. Oh, my God. Apple's not going to make $50 billion in profit? Oh, my God. They're only going to make $45 billion? Okay, so I have no sympathy here. The reality is it should be done. It can be done. But the willpower isn't there and the regulations aren't there. You'll see lobbying from Silicon Valley saying, oh, my God, everything will crash and burn if we don't use offshore labor. And the reality is, no, it won't. And the question is, what do we want to see as an economy and as a country? And Trump is basically raising his hand and saying what we want to see is domestic manufacturing. That's only a good thing. I kind of take that Buddhist middle path road where, I was driving a car back in the 70s and it was a pretty crappy Detroit car.
Yeah.
I liked Japan coming in with competition. I like competition. I don't like the idea of manufacturing happens in the U.S. and things happen here only because of regulation. But I also recognize that things have gone way too far the other direction. So there needs to be more of a balanced approach. You will hear from Silicon Valley lobbyists that my $5 or $10 per iPhone quote is off. They're going to claim it's $100. That's not true because remember, you're paying. Let's say you pay your average U.S. worker. Let's throw a number down, $25 an hour to basically hot gun a couple of parts together. They can have a throughput of 20 devices in an hour. So how does $25 an hour for a worker who's basically a buck a finished iPhone per hour? How does that translate into $100? It doesn't. The lobbyists are going to try to go extreme over to a different direction. The reality is this is definitely a move that is somewhat inflationary. By making steel here, you're definitely going to be paying more for steel. But at the end of the day, don't we want Americans to work? Isn't that ultimately, and so this comes down to the question of the wall of worry that we were kind of touching on earlier. We bring in more manufacturing. The labor market's so tight right now, where wages are ultimately going to accelerate. They've started to pick up. We've got some wage inflation. It's inevitable that it's going to accelerate. And people will say, oh, my God, this is terrible. we're creating inflation. But this is the good inflation. This is the inflation that comes from a strong economy. This is the inflation we want. What we want to see, though, is that inflation in goods, the stuff that we've got to pay off, even though that's going up, we want to see wage inflation go up even faster. We want to see the real economy take off even faster so that, yeah, okay, I'm paying a little bit more for my can of Coke because the can itself cost another nickel. But I also got a 10% raise this year, or 5% raise, because, my company's doing great and we're exporting and life is good.
Yeah, life is good. So what's going to happen here? They're all going to blink in the end because they need us more than we need them. I mean, is that what it really
timing's October. Timing's October. We got 2 months for this. And I say the timing's October because
before
Trump
the election
wants to go into the midterms. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that everyone involved is sitting there. They're political animals, and they know that Trump needs to bring home something. He needs to show some success, or he's just going to raise the heat until he does. Mm-hmm. They want to. I think I saw something today. The IMF, God knows how quality they are, but the IMF is saying, look, this trade war is going to cost the world GDP almost 0.5%. That's huge. Mm-hmm. And again, when you've got countries like Germany that are almost recessionary, and you've got countries like China that are suddenly contracting in terms of their growth just reversing, you've got their attention. They're the ones who are suffering the most when trade goes south. And they're the ones that Trump is saying, let's do a deal. Trump is going to get something by October so that he can rally the troops and get the elections going forward. And that's huge. I mean, I'm long and strong the market. And I'm long and strong because, first of all, second quarter was off the charts great. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I look at this quarter, and even though we've got some hiccups, Harley Davidson saying, oops, we're not going to make our number because of, all these things that are happening. I think that it's been mostly priced in. Mm-hmm. And I think also there are pockets of troubles, pockets of strength. Overall, though, this is 100% positive for the U.S. And so when you come out in a couple months and Trump does he's a showman. Yeah. He's going to come out and he's going to start flashing all these wonderful deals, everything happening. People are going to wake up and say, wait a second, are you telling me that we're exporting more and it's no longer Boeing only?
Right.
That wait, things have picked up, and that this is a structural change. This is an ongoing long-term shift. And then Trump is probably going to throw out, remember, he kind of teased this last year. We've got that infrastructure proposal out there. He's going to throw that out there. He's got the market where he wants it. Look at the stock market. Stock market's up while he's doing this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now that's before he shows the goodies. Imagine what the stock market does when he starts showing the goodies. And then in October, earnings season again, and companies are like, yeah, this whole thing hasn't affected us whatsoever. We're doing great. In fact, we're doing even better.
All right. So this is going to wind up being a net plus for Trump, even though it's getting played with all sorts of hysteria, especially like on the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. You can always count on the Wall Street Journal to be total free trade. I mean, I was at Freedom Fest and just, Andrew, amazing thing, like the keynote speaker was the biggest never Trumper ever. I'm talking about George Will, and he was making a statement. He's making a statement. Well, I have a deficit with my barber because he charges me $25. And I was thinking, man, you should really get a refund because he's doing a lousy job. But he charges me $25 for a haircut, and I have nothing to give him to get it back. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but your barber isn't going to use that money to take a taxi to your home at night and take his razor and slash your throat. This is a war. This isn't just it'll all work itself out in the end because just McDonald's can afford to lose 5 cents on every hamburger because they're going to make it back in volume. This is the real world. And these countries, these trading blocs have been taking advantage of the United States for decades. And finally, there's somebody there to say no mas. And the same thing with NATO. NATO is exactly the same thing that we're seeing in exactly the same way. It's part of it really being played out.
I mean, Nikki Haley at the UN said this yesterday. She's like, okay, you guys like to gripe and the Palestinian cause, and you're always fed up with Israel and you say all these wonderful things. But the reality is we're the ones who foot the bill.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're the ones who are paying everything. If you really, really, really wanted to do something, you'd shut down the words and actually put money up. Iran, you put no money up.
Mm-hmm.
Saudi Arabia, you put minimal. Turkey, you put minimal. But you give us grief. I mean, it's literally like a parent talking to kids and saying, I put food on the table, clothes on your back, a roof over your head, and then you spit in my eye?
Yeah.
And you've been doing it for how long? I don't think so. And you want the keys to a car and you want a new car? Are you nuts? Are you out of your mind? So it's literally like we've got adults in the room at last, like you said with NATO. That's why Trump is going to win. At the end of the day, you cannot fight the basic premise here. Now, he's not talking about, let's poop on our allies. He's saying if you really were the allies, you would be living up to your agreements.
And that's what it comes down to. Great point. And it's a new sheriff in town, and things are working differently, and there's a lot of cognitive dissonance.
And the kids are crying. I mean, let's face it.
They don't want to admit it, like you've taken away the punch bowl. You've taken away their allowance at the candy store on the corner, and they can't just go there, take whatever candy they want, and leave. Now they actually have to pay, and they're none too happy about it. Hey, Andrew, where do we find you these days, and what's the deal with
Economics. Come to Moneyball Economics. I put out data-driven analysis of what's really going on in the world, very balanced, agenda-free analysis, and also with ideas about how to take advantage of them. Been doing really good. We talked about shorting the Turkish lira a couple months ago. That's been a good call, going long on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to be the gold fear trade going forward, and it certainly seems to be that way. Let's face it. If you're an emerging economy and you want to get your money out of Dodge, you don't do it with bars of gold anymore. You do it with a flashcard that has all your Bitcoin on it, and that's going to be the way of the next millennium.
All right. Well, interesting premise, and we'll explore that in a later date. Anyways, you'll find a link to Andrew's site in the show notes to this interview on Financial Survival Network. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter. And hey, all of that aside, just send us an email if you're interested, kl@kerrylutz.com. The Twitter handle is @KerryLutz. The Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Andrew, we'll talk to you again soon.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.